The first thing you hear isn't the betrayal itself. The first thing you hear is the silence that comes right after. It's a special kind of quiet, the kind that rushes in to fill a vacuum where your future used to be. For me, that silence sounded like the expensive, double-paned glass of Alistair Finch's corner office, sealing him in with my work and sealing me out with his verdict. He leaned back in his Herman Miller chair, a throne of mesh and chrome, and steepled his fingers. The gesture was meant to convey thoughtful authority, but it just looked like a spider weaving a web. He said the words, and the sound in the room died. "I just don't have a ticket for you, Layla. It's a headcount thing. You understand." He didn't say it apologetically. He didn't even say it with the manufactured sympathy of a corporate executioner. He said it with the flat, dismissive finality of someone telling their Roomba it can't come to dinner. It was a logistical detail, a loose end being tidied up. I was a loose end. After 6 months of pouring every waking hour, every spark of an idea, every ounce of my life force into Project Helios, I had been tidied up. My name is Layla, and I was, until that moment, the lead and only architect of the most revolutionary geospatial analytics engine our industry had ever seen. I was also an intern, and my boss, the man who was about to present my soul's work as his own magnum opus at the Global Energy Summit, had just told me I wasn't important enough to even be in the room. If you've ever had your contribution erased, your name scrubbed from a project you bled for, then you know the specific brand of cold fury that was beginning to uncoil in my stomach. You know what it feels like to be a ghost at your own feast. If this sounds familiar, if you've ever been in a position where you felt invisible, do me a favor and let me know in the comments below. It helps to know I'm not just screaming into the void here. Alistair was still looking at me, a faint paternalistic smile on his lips, waiting for me to nod and accept my own erasure. Project Helios was everything. It was a system that could analyze terabytes of environmental, geological, and economic data to pinpoint the optimal location for renewable energy installations with a 99.7% accuracy rating. It was my baby. I hadn't just written the code, I had dreamed the architecture. I had built its logic from the ground up, fueled by lukewarm coffee and the desperate burning need to prove myself. Alistair, the head of special projects at GeoNova Solutions, had been my champion, my mentor, or so I thought. In reality, he had been my curator. He'd taken my raw, brilliant creation, polished it, put it in a fancy frame, and was now signing his name in the bottom corner. "The presentation is locked," he continued, his voice smooth as polished river stone. "The board is ecstatic. They see this as the beginning of a new era for GeoNova. For me." He had the decency to look momentarily abashed at the slip, but it passed like a cloud shadow. He believed it. In his mind, the line between my work and his ownership had blurred, then vanished entirely. I was the quarry that built the pyramid. He was the pharaoh who would be buried in it. I stood there, my cheap portfolio clutched in my hand, the plastic cool against my sweating palm. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, but on the outside, I was a statue. I had learned early on at GeoNova that emotion was a liability, a currency only the powerful could afford to spend. For an intern, it was a one-way ticket to being labeled unprofessional, or, worse, unstable. So I just nodded slowly. My voice, when it came out, was terrifyingly calm. "I understand, Alistair. Thank you for the opportunity." It was the corporate equivalent of a defeated soldier kissing the boot on their neck. It was what he expected. It was what he needed to feel magnanimous in his theft. He smiled, a genuine, relieved smile this time. "That's the spirit, Layla. You have a bright future. Just keep your head down and keep working hard." The irony was so thick it was practically suffocating. I turned and walked out of his glass cage, the silence of the office broken only by the soft, clinical click of the heavy door closing behind me, the sound of my future being shut away. But the thing about shutting a door is that it gives you a moment, in the hallway on the other side, to decide if you're going to just walk away, or if you're going to find a way to kick it down. And as I stood there, bathed in the cold fluorescent light, I decided I wasn't just going to kick the door down. I was going to dismantle the entire building. It wasn't about revenge. It was about a correction, a realignment of the universe. I held it together. I walked the gauntlet of cubicles and offices, past the buzzing fluorescent lights that always seemed to hum a tune of quiet desperation. I smiled at the receptionist. I even managed a placid nod to a colleague who asked if I was excited about the summit. "Oh, absolutely," I'd said, my voice a marvel of controlled neutrality. "It's a huge moment for the company." Each word was a perfectly crafted lie. A little stone laid on the path away from the screaming abyss that had just opened up inside me. The elevator ride down was a silent eternity. I stared at my reflection in the polished steel doors, a pale, blank-faced girl in a slightly too big blazer I'd bought from a thrift store. I didn't recognize her. The person who had walked into this building 6 months ago was a firestorm of ambition and ideas. This person was a ghost. The mask didn't crack until I was inside my car, a beat-up 10-year-old sedan parked in the furthest, cheapest corner of the garage. I slammed the door, and the sound was a pathetic thud, absorbed by the concrete and grime. And then, finally, I let go. It wasn't a loud theatrical breakdown. It was a silent, gut-wrenching implosion. My breath hitched, a ragged, painful sound in the confines of the small car. A single hot tear traced a path through my foundation, and then another, and another. It was the kind of crying that comes from a place deeper than sadness. It came from a place of profound nullification. It was the feeling of being erased, all those nights, all those weekends, all the skipped lunches and missed calls from my mom, all of it, for what? To be a footnote in Alistair Finch's biography? To be a headcount problem? The word echoed in my mind, headcount, as if I were a number on a spreadsheet, a resource to be allocated, and when inconvenient, discarded. My mind started to rewind, not by choice, but like a damaged film reel, flickering through the montage of my own exploitation. I remembered my first day. I was so impossibly green, so full of a desperate, pleading eagerness to please. I'd walked into the Geonova lobby, a cathedral of brushed steel and recessed lighting, and felt like I had finally arrived. Alistair had been the picture of a modern, enlightened leader. He'd talked about collaboration, about innovation, about how at Geonova, the best idea wins, no matter where it comes from. He'd looked me right in the eye and said, "We don't believe in hierarchy here, Layla. We believe in talent." I had swallowed it whole. I had believed him. The project, then just a theoretical concept, was my assignment. Build a proof of concept for a predictive real estate model for renewable energy. It was vague, massive, and beautifully impossible. It was a perfect intern project, big enough to be impressive, but nebulous enough that if I failed, no one important would be affected. The work became my entire world. I lived and breathed geospatial data. I dreamed in longitude and latitude. The first breakthrough came 3 months in, at 2 a.m, in my tiny shoebox apartment. I was staring at a dataset of solar radiation patterns and realized everyone was asking the wrong question. They were looking for the sunniest places. I realized the key wasn't just sun, it was a complex matrix of over 200 variables. Grid proximity, land cost, local tax incentives, soil composition, wind shear patterns, even migratory bird routes. It wasn't a real estate problem, it was a symphony. I started building the engine, the core logic of what would become Helios. I worked in a frenzy, my fingers flying across the keyboard. The code was elegant, clean, and mine. The next morning, I showed Alistair. He stared at the initial output, a map of West Texas glowing with potential sites no one had ever considered. A flicker of something crossed his face. I thought it was awe. I now know it was avarice. "That's a great start, Layla," he'd said, his voice casual. "Clean it up, put it in a deck, and send it over. I'll run it up the flagpole." That became the pattern. I would have a breakthrough. I would build the model, write the code, run the analysis. I would send him my raw, brilliant, messy work. A week later, a polished version of my work would appear in a presentation under his name. My data, my insights filtered through his corporate speak and presented as his strategic vision. He was a master of it. He would change the colors on my graphs, rephrase my conclusions in impenetrable business jargon, and add a slide with his own headshot. He never explicitly said, "I did this." He would say, "The project is showing tremendous promise," or, "We are making incredible strides." The corporate we was his shield, and I was the we. Then there was Elias Vance. Elias was a ghost of a different sort. He was a senior data architect who had been with Geonova for 20 years. He occupied a small, dark office in a forgotten corridor of the building, a place where old servers went to die. He was brilliant, a legend in his field, but he didn't play the political games. He didn't schmooze, so he had been sidelined, left to manage legacy systems while shiny suits like Alistair took the glory. Elias saw everything. He saw me, hunched over my keyboard at 9 at night. He saw Alistair preening in meetings. He never said anything directly. That wasn't his way. His support was subtle, almost cryptic. One evening, he'd shuffled up to my desk and without a word, placed a heavy, out-of-print book on my desk. It was called Systemic Elegance. Inside, a chapter on multivariate predictive modeling was bookmarked. It contained the exact theoretical framework I needed to solve a problem I'd been wrestling with for weeks. Another time, after Alistair had presented my Phase 2 analysis as his own, Elias sent me a one-line message on the company's internal chat. It just said, "Good architecture is invisible until it fails. Good architects are often treated the same way. Don't let them bury you in the foundation." I hadn't fully understood it then. I understood it now. I was the foundation of Project Helios, and Alistair was building his career on top of me, assuming I was happy to bear the weight. The most bitter memory was the promise. About a month before the summit, Alistair had called me into his office. The energy conglomerate, our big potential client, was ecstatic with the preliminary findings. A contract was on the horizon, a massive company-making contract. He was glowing, high on the fumes of his impending triumph. "Layla, you've done incredible work here," he'd said, his voice thick with false sincerity. "When this project gets its own division, and it will, I want you to be my lead analyst. We'll get you converted to full-time, a real salary, the works. I'm even adding you as a co-author on the white paper. Just get us over the finish line for the summit." It was the carrot, the perfect, juicy, irresistible carrot. And I had chased it, like a fool. I worked even harder. I refined the user interface. I built in the live demo capabilities he would need on stage. I polished every last detail until Helios shone like a diamond. I handed him the keys to the kingdom, and he had used them to lock me out. Back in my car, the tears had stopped. The sorrow was burning off, leaving something cold and hard in its place. A diamond of pure, unadulterated rage. But rage is messy. Rage makes mistakes. What I needed was not rage. I needed focus. I opened my laptop, the screen a stark white light in the dim garage. I was just going to delete everything. My local files, my notes, my code repositories. A digital scorched earth. Let him stand on that stage with a beautiful presentation and a hollow, non-functional demo. Let him fall. But as my finger hovered over the delete key, Elias's words came back to me. "Don't let them bury you." Sabotage was a form of burial. It was an admission of defeat. It was the act of a victim. I was not a victim. I was an architect. I started clicking through my old files, through the graveyard of my own work. And then I saw it, a folder I had forgotten about. A folder named Audit Trail. Elias had helped me set it up months ago, insisting on it with a rare, quiet urgency. "Always keep your own receipts," he'd said, "especially when someone else is paying the bill." It was encrypted. I typed in the password, a long, complex string based on the publication date of Systemic Elegance. The folder opened, and there it was, my salvation. It was a complete, irrefutable record of my work. Every Git commit with my username and a timestamp. Every version of the core algorithm, showing its evolution from a simple script to a complex engine. Screen recordings of me debugging the code. And the crown jewel, a saved copy of an email chain with Dr. Eris Thorne, the lead scientist from the energy conglomerate. It was from an early technical review. She had asked a deeply complex question about the model's handling of atmospheric refraction data. Alistair had been on the email. He had replied with a word salad of corporate nonsense, completely failing to answer her. I, the lowly intern, had jumped in with a detailed 3-paragraph explanation, complete with code snippets. Dr. Thorne's reply was saved right there. Just 3 words addressed to me. "Thank you. That's brilliant." Alistair had never mentioned it. He had buried it. Staring at that email, at the proof of my own brilliance acknowledged by the one person who truly mattered, the last of the despair vanished. It was replaced by a chilling, crystalline clarity. The path forward was no longer dark. It was a brightly lit runway. Alistair thought the presentation was the weapon. He was wrong. The presentation was just the stage. My work, the living, breathing Helios engine, was the weapon. And he didn't know how to use it. I did. The switch flipped. The intern was gone. The architect was in control. It wasn't about revenge. I kept telling myself that. It wasn't about making Alistair suffer. It was about a simple, fundamental act of truth-telling. It was about ownership. My plan began to form, not in a storm of emotion, but in the cold, quiet calculus of a system designer. I was going to the summit, and I was going to give the real presentation. The plan unfurled in my mind with the clean, logical precision of a well-written piece of code. It had dependencies, variables, and a single desired output: the truth. The first step was the most obvious. I couldn't crash the party without a ticket. Alistair had made it clear GeoNova wasn't providing one. Fine, I would provide my own. I pulled up the Global Energy Summit website on my laptop. The corporate passes were thousands of dollars, an impossible sum. But my eyes caught a small link at the bottom of the page: academic and student registration. I was still technically enrolled in my university, my internship part of a work-study program. My student ID was still valid. The price was a fraction of the corporate rate. It was still a painful amount, more than I had in my checking account, but it was achievable. I used my emergency credit card, the one I kept for medical bills or car repairs. This felt like both an emergency procedure to repair my stolen future. The confirmation email arrived a moment later. Subject: Welcome to the Global Energy Summit. I had a beachhead. Now for the weapon. The swapped PowerPoint was a good idea. A perfect piece of psychological warfare. It was petty, yes, but its beauty was in its subtlety. It wasn't sabotage, it was malicious compliance. I was giving him a draft, just as he was giving me a draft of a career. But I knew that wasn't enough. A footer on a slide was a momentary embarrassment. Alistair was slick. He could recover. He could spin it as a mix-up, a charming bit of chaos from his brilliant but slightly disorganized team. The real leverage, the real power, lay in the live demo. He was planning to connect to the GeoNova staging server, where a sandboxed, limited version of the Helios engine was running. It was programmed to respond perfectly to a very specific, pre-agreed-upon set of queries. It was a puppet. Alistair knew the strings to pull to make it dance his specific tune, but if a single question deviated from that script, the puppet would collapse into a heap of error messages. The key wasn't to cut the strings. The key was to be the only one in the room who could truly make the puppet dance. This led to the second, more complex part of the plan. I needed my own version of Helios, a full, untethered God mode version. I had it, of course, on my local machine, but I couldn't just bring my work laptop. I needed something discrete, something I could run independently. My mind immediately went to a project I'd been toying with on weekends, a portable, self-contained server built on a Raspberry Pi. It was a geeky little hobby, a way to keep my skills sharp. Now it was the centerpiece of my entire strategy. I spent the next 2 days in a feverish haze of work. I ported the entire Helios engine, the database, the analytics layer, the visualization front end, onto the tiny computer. I optimized the code to run on the limited hardware. It was a masterpiece of computational efficiency. The entire revolutionary heart of GeoNova's future now lived on a device the size of a deck of cards, sitting on my cluttered desk, powered by a simple phone charger. It was my ark. But hardware and software were only two pieces of the trinity. I needed a human element. I needed an ally, and I needed an audience. The ally was obvious. I sent a single encrypted message to Elias Vance. The messaging app we used was one he had recommended, one that left no trace on company servers. The message was simple: the pharaoh is going to the pyramid. I'm going too. I have the blueprints. Are you in? The reply came 3 hours later. Also a single line: the architects must be present when the keystone is set. Meet me at the old coffee shop. The old coffee shop was a rundown place halfway between the office and my apartment, a neutral ground. When I saw him, he looked just as he always did. Worn, tired, but with an intelligence in his eyes that missed nothing. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He just slid a slim manila folder across the sticky table. In it was a copy of the master service agreement between GeoNova and the energy conglomerate, their potential flagship client. He tapped a paragraph in the addendum. Section 4, Clause B, Key Person Provision. My breath caught. I had never seen this document. It was kept under lock and key by the legal and executive teams. The clause stated that the viability of the contract was contingent on the continued involvement of the lead architect of the Helios predictive model. It was a standard clause in high-stakes tech contracts designed to prevent a company from selling a deal based on the talent of one team, only to reassign that team later. But the clause was a landmine. Who was the lead architect? There was no official title. Alistair had made sure of that. He had absorbed the role, the title, the credit like a black hole. In his mind and on every organizational chart, it was him. But the work itself, the code, the commits, the very soul of the machine, that was mine. The clause was beautifully, dangerously ambiguous. Elias knew it, and now I knew it. This is a debatable point, Elias said, his voice a low rumble. Legally, an intern's work product is the company's property. That's not in question. But this clause isn't about property. It's about performance. The contract is contingent on a specific skill set. a specific mind. If the client believes that mind is not the one they were sold, they have grounds to pause, to renegotiate, to walk. It was the most perfect loophole I had ever seen, a plausible inaccuracy that could topple an empire. He gave me one more thing, a business card. It wasn't for Dr. Eris Thorne, the big boss. It was for her lead technical engineer, a man named Ben Carter. Dr. Thorne makes the decisions, Elias explained, but she listens to him. He's the one who has to actually work with our tech. He's the one who will know, instantly, if the person on stage is a fraud. He's speaking on a panel, the morning before Alistair's presentation. Get to him. Don't sell, just show. The last piece was the audience. I reached out to a friend from my university days, Mark, who now ran a scrappy but respected tech blog focused on the renewable energy sector. He was a journalistic bulldog. He smelled hype and empty marketing from a mile away. I sent him a message. Hey Mark, are you going to the summit? I have something you might want to see. The real story behind GeoNova's big announcement. A live demo. No marketing bullshit. Just the raw tech. His reply was immediate. Intrigued. Where and when? I had my stage, my weapon, and my audience. The night before the conference was 0 hour. I had to perform the swap. My temporary admin access, the elevated privileges they gave me to manage the Helios staging server, was set to expire at midnight on the first day of the conference. A classic, stupid IT oversight. They should have revoked it the moment the project was finalized, but they hadn't. They had forgotten about the intern. I logged into the central server from my apartment, my heart hammered against my ribs. It felt like every keystroke was a thunderclap. I navigated to the secure folder for the summit presentations. There it was, Helios presentation final v12.pttx. Polished, perfect, anesthetized. Beside it on my own desktop was my version, Helios presentation draft v2.pttx. The content was nearly identical, the slide order, the speaker notes I had written for him, the embedded graphics. But the master slide template was different. In the bottom left corner of every single slide, in a discreet but clear 8-point font, was the footer I had created months ago and forgotten to delete from that version. Project Helios, Predictive Engine v1.1. Drafted by Layla K., awaiting feedback from A. Finch. I took a deep breath. I renamed my draft file to match his final version exactly. I checked the file sizes. They were within a few kilobytes of each other, close enough to be statistically irrelevant. I dragged the file. A small window popped up. The destination already has a file named Helios Presentation Final v12.pttx. Do you want to replace it? I clicked replace. The progress bar filled in a fraction of a second. It was done. The seed was planted. It wasn't about revenge, I told myself again, the phrase becoming a mantra, a shield against the enormity of what I had just done. It was about attribution. It was a correction in the historical record. I logged out, packed my bag with my laptop, my blazer, and a tiny computer that held the future in its silicon heart. I was ready. The conference was a sensory assault, a cavernous convention center humming with the energy of thousands of ambitious people. The air was thick with the smell of new carpet, stale coffee, and expensive cologne. Everyone wore a badge, a tribal signifier of their rank and affiliation. Alistair said, Alistair Finch, GeoNova Solutions, featured speaker. Mine said, Layla K., student. I felt like a spy, an infiltrator behind enemy lines. I spent the first morning like a hunter, stalking my prey. I found Ben Carter's panel discussion, The Future of Grid Integration. He was exactly as Elias had described him, sharp, no nonsense, and deeply technical. He spoke with a weary frustration about vendors who overpromised and underdelivered, who showed him flashy user interfaces that crumbled under the weight of real-world data. He was a man who valued substance over style. He was my perfect audience. After his panel, I approached him. I didn't gush. I didn't pitch. I was calm, professional. Mr. Carter, my name is Layla. I'm the architect of the Helios engine you've been reviewing. I know you have technical questions the marketing materials don't answer. I can answer them. He looked at my student badge, a flicker of skepticism in his eyes. Then he looked at me, really looked at me. Maybe he saw the exhaustion, the quiet, desperate competence. I have a working, unrestricted demo with me, I added. No slides, just the engine. His skepticism wavered, replaced by curiosity. He gave me a curt nod. I have 15 minutes before my next session. Show me. We found a small, empty breakout room. I took out my laptop and the tiny Raspberry Pi server. I connected them, and the Helios login screen appeared. His eyebrows shot up. You're running this locally, on that? I just nodded. Yes, the full stack. For the next 10 minutes, I gave him the tour. Not the one Alistair had memorized, but the real one. I showed him the raw data feeds, the algorithmic weighting, the way the system could model cascading failures in a regional power grid. I showed him the features Alistair didn't even know existed. Then I handed him the keyboard. Ask it anything, I said. He started typing. He threw complex queries at it, obscure edge cases, the kind of brutal real-world problems that choke canned demos. The Helios engine didn't choke, it sang. It delivered elegant, insightful, correct answers in seconds. He was silent for a full minute, just staring at the screen. Finally, he looked at me, and all the skepticism was gone. It was replaced by something that looked like respect. Why aren't you the one on stage this afternoon? He asked, his voice low. It wasn't about revenge, I started to say, but the words felt hollow even to me. I just smiled a little. It's a head count thing. The time had come. I found a seat in the back of the main auditorium. It was a massive room, packed with hundreds of people. The lights dimmed. A booming voice announced the next speaker. Alistair Finch, Vice President of Special Projects at GeoNova Solutions, presenting a revolutionary new paradigm in energy logistics. Alistair walked onto the stage to a round of polite applause. He looked incredible. His suit was perfect. His hair was perfect. His smile was a weapon of mass charisma. He radiated confidence. He was a king, taking his throne. My heart was a cold, heavy stone in my chest. For a moment, a wave of doubt washed over me. What had I done? I was just an intern. He was a vice president. I was about to commit career suicide in the most public way imaginable. He began to speak, his voice resonating through the auditorium. The future of energy isn't about finding more fuel, he boomed. It's about finding more intelligence. He clicked the remote in his hand. The first slide appeared on the 3 massive screens behind him. It was the title slide. Project Helios, a new era of geospatial intelligence. And there, at the bottom, in small but achingly clear text, were the words. Drafted by Layla K., awaiting feedback from A. Finch. A quiet murmur rippled through the front rows. A few people squinted. Alistair hadn't seen it yet. He was beaming at the audience, soaking in the moment. He clicked to the next slide. Our proprietary engine analyzes over 200 distinct variables. The slide showed a beautiful, complex word cloud of data points I had designed. And in the corner, the same footer. Drafted by Layla K., awaiting feedback from A. Finch. This time, Alistair saw it. I watched his eyes flick down to the monitor at his feet, then up to the giant screen behind him. I saw the exact moment the blood drained from his face. A flicker. A tiny, almost imperceptible break in his perfect composure. But he was a professional. He didn't stop. He pressed on, his voice a little tighter now. He started clicking through the slides faster, as if he could outrun the damning little sentence that followed him on every single one. The murmurs in the audience grew. People were whispering to each other, pointing at the screens. The foundation of his authority was visibly crumbling, one slide at a time. He was no longer a visionary presenting his creation. He looked like a man reading from someone else's notes. Then he reached the live demo, the moment of truth. Okay, he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his panicked eyes. Let's see Helios in action. The demo interface appeared on screen. This was his safe harbor, the part he had rehearsed 100 times. He typed in the first scripted query, a simple request for solar potential in the Mojave Desert. As designed, the system returned a flawless, beautiful map. He visibly relaxed. See? Effortless. But then a hand went up in the audience. It was my friend Mark, the tech blogger. Alistair, he called out, his voice clear and confident. That's impressive, but can you model the output in the same region if you factor in the projected impact of the new federal water conservation statutes on land lease costs? It was a brilliant question. It was complex, timely, and, most importantly, completely off script. Alistair froze. The silence in the auditorium was deafening. I could see the cogs turning in his head, searching for a script that wasn't there. Yes, of course, he stammered, turning back to the keyboard. The water statutes are factored in. He typed something, a clumsy guess at the right query parameters. He hit enter. The screen, which was supposed to show a dynamic new map, simply refreshed, no result. He tried again, typing more frantically this time. A red error message popped up. Query invalid. Unrecognized parameter H2O legal. The audience was dead silent. He was drowning in front of them, in the bright, unforgiving glare of the stage lights. He laughed, a high, brittle sound. Looks like we have a slight network glitch with the live server feed. The classic excuse. The last refuge of the unprepared. But no one was buying it. Not after seeing his name wasn't on the slides. Not after seeing the deer in the headlights panic in his eyes. His presentation, his moment of triumph, was dead. And in the back of the room, I pressed stop on the screen recording on my phone. I had my receipt. The fallout was not a loud explosion, but a quiet, rapid collapse. While Alistair was stammering through a disastrous Q&A session on stage, fending off pointed questions from my blogger friend and other newly skeptical audience members, I was already in motion. The text from Ben Carter had come through before Alistair had even finished speaking. My boss wants to talk to you, now. He gave me a room number in the hotel adjoining the convention center. I slipped out of the auditorium. The schadenfreude I felt quickly replaced by a cold, sharp focus. This was the moment everything pivoted. I met Ben in the hallway. He didn't say a word, just ushered me into a large suite, and there, sitting at a conference table, was Dr. Eris Thorne. She was an imposing figure, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through you. She didn't look angry. She looked like a scientist who had just discovered her data had been fatally compromised. She gestured to a chair. I sat. Ben closed the door behind us. On the large television screen in the suite, a live feed of the conference was playing. Alistair was still on stage, sweating under the lights, his charisma stripped away to reveal a desperate, flailing man. Dr. Thorne muted the television with a decisive click of the remote. "So," she began, her voice calm and dangerously level, "you're Layla K." It wasn't a question. I just nodded. "Ben showed me your demonstration," she continued, her gaze unwavering. He was impressed. I am too. Which leads me to a very simple, very expensive question. Who, exactly, have we been in business with for the past 6 months? I took a breath. This was it. No more hiding. No more subtlety. Just the truth. "Dr. Thorne," I said, my voice as steady as I could make it. "You have been in business with the Helios engine." I built the engine. Alistair Finch built the PowerPoint presentation. I paused, letting the words land. "As you've just seen, he seems to have brought the wrong one." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. It vanished as quickly as it came. "We have a multi-million-dollar conditional contract with GeoNova," she said, tapping a finger on the table. "A contract that is predicated on the performance of that engine, and as our legal team was very specific about, on the continued involvement of its lead architect." I was led to believe that was Alistair Finch. Today's performance suggests that is not the case. She was reciting the key person clause back to me. Elias had been right. It wasn't about property. It was about performance. Alistair had failed the performance review in the most public way possible. I didn't badmouth him. I didn't complain about my stolen credit or the long hours. It would have sounded petty, like a disgruntled intern. Instead, I simply stated facts. I told her about the genesis of the core algorithm, the multivariate analysis model I developed, the specific breakthroughs that made Helios what it was. I didn't present myself as a victim. I presented myself as the asset. The entire time, Ben Carter stood by the window, occasionally nodding or adding a technical clarification. He was my validator. He had seen the code. He knew I was telling the truth. After I finished, Dr. Thorne was silent for a long moment. She looked at Ben, who gave a single decisive nod. She then looked back at me. "Effective immediately," she said, her voice like cracking ice. "We are placing our contract with GeoNova on indefinite hold, pending a full review of what appears to be a material misrepresentation of their core assets and personnel." She stood up. "Thank you for your time, Layla, and for your honesty. We will be in touch." The walk back to my cheap hotel room was surreal. The noise of the conference faded away. The world felt muted, distant. I had just detonated a bomb in the heart of GeoNova, and the only question was how far the shockwave would travel. It didn't take long to find out. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. I answered. "Layla?" It was Alistair. His voice was unrecognizable. The smooth, confident baritone was gone, replaced by a raw, ragged edge of panic. "Where are you?" he demanded. "I just got out of a meeting with the board. Thorne's people called our CEO directly. They're pulling the plug. You have to fix this." It was breathtaking. The audacity, the complete narcissistic inability to see his own role in the catastrophe. He wasn't apologetic. He was furious. At me. "What you did today," he sputtered, "that was a professional hit job. You sabotaged me. You sabotaged the company." I stayed silent, letting him burn himself out. Then came the pivot, the desperate counteroffer. Look, he said, his voice shifting, trying to find that old charming tone and failing miserably. Let's be reasonable. There's been a misunderstanding. You come back, we'll fix this. I'll give you the full-time job, the title, lead architect, a 10% bonus on the contract value. Whatever you want, just call Thorne. Tell her it was a prank, a miscommunication. We can spin this, we can fix it. He was offering me everything he had denied me, the very things he had promised and withheld to keep me compliant. He was offering me the keys to my own cage, as long as I agreed to step back inside and lock the door behind me. I let the silence stretch, a long, delicious pause. Alistair, I said finally, my voice devoid of any emotion at all. I don't think you're in a position to offer me a job anymore. I hung up. I agreed to meet him in the lobby bar of the conference hotel. It felt necessary. Not for him, but for me. I needed a final, formal closing bracket on this chapter of my life. He was already there when I arrived, hunched over a table, nursing a glass of whiskey. He looked smaller, diminished. The $1,000 suit was rumpled, his tie was loose, and the confident posture was gone, replaced by the weary slump of a defeated man. He looked up as I approached, his eyes bloodshot and filled with a strange mix of rage and desperation. There you are, he muttered. Do you have any idea what you've done? I sat down opposite him, placing my hands calmly on the table. I have a very clear idea of what I've done, Alistair. I showed a client my work. He scoffed, a bitter, ugly sound. Your work? That's company property. You signed an agreement. Everything you created, every line of code, belongs to GeoNova. I've spoken to legal. We can sue you for theft of intellectual property. We can ruin you. It was his last bullet, the threat, the scare tactic of the powerless. I had been expecting it. I reached into my portfolio and pulled out a single piece of paper. I slid it across the table. It was a printout of the first page of the Git commit log for the Helios engine, a chronological list of every change, every update, every addition to the code. And next to every single entry for the past 6 months was the same username, Al Kardash, my username, my signature, carved into the digital bedrock of the project. And next to each entry, a date and a timestamp, an irrefutable, uneditable diary of creation. He stared at it, his face turning a pasty white. The legal threat evaporated from his eyes, replaced by the flat, dull look of checkmate. He knew what it was. He knew it was proof. This was never about revenge, Alistair, I said, my voice quiet but firm. The phrase felt different now. It wasn't a mantra to convince myself anymore. It was a simple statement of fact. It was about attribution. You could have put my name on the first slide. You could have given me a ticket. You could have acknowledged the simple truth. But you chose to erase me. The consequences of that choice are yours, not mine. He slumped back in his chair, the fight completely gone out of him. He looked old. What do you want, Layla? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. A payoff? A settlement? I stood up. I want nothing from you, Alistair. I never did. I just wanted my name on my work. I turned and walked away, leaving him alone with my receipt and his glass of whiskey. I didn't look back. The official news came 2 days later, not in a dramatic phone call, but in a quiet, forwarded email from Elias. It was an internal memo from the CEO of GeoNova. It announced with regret the immediate departure of Alistair Finch to pursue other opportunities, the corporate euphemism for being fired in disgrace. A second memo announced a full-scale restructuring of the Special Projects Division and a temporary pause on the Helios project pending an internal audit. The shockwave had hit. The edifice Alistair had built, propped up by my work and his lies, had crumbled into dust. It happened off-screen, a quiet, inevitable result of his own arrogance. The system had corrected itself, not because I had screamed for justice, but because I had calmly and competently demonstrated the truth. The scene shifts. The world turns. 2 months have passed. The oppressive, recycled air of the GeoNova office is a distant memory. I'm sitting in a new office. It's small, with exposed brick walls and a large window that floods the room with actual, honest-to-God sunlight. The air smells like fresh paint and possibility. On the door, a simple, elegant plaque reads, Helios Analytics. Layla K., founder and chief architect. It turned out that Dr. Thorne and her company weren't just interested in the Helios engine. They were interested in the architect who built it. They hadn't just moved their contract. They had provided the seed funding for me to start my own firm, built around the technology I had created. Their only condition was that I be the one in charge. I'm at a conference table, my conference table. Across from me sits Elias Vance. He's my CTO. The weary, haunted look is gone from his eyes. He looks lighter, energized. He's holding a whiteboard marker and enthusiastically sketching out a new system architecture. To his left is my friend Mark, the blogger, who I hired to run communications. He's reviewing a press release that announces our official launch and our partnership with the energy conglomerate. A few other faces are around the table. Two brilliant young coders I hired straight out of university, both of whom had been overlooked at their previous jobs. This is my team. A team built not on politics or charisma, but on pure, unadulterated competence. There is a sense of calm in the room, a sense of balance, of rightness. This is the new reality I built, not out of the ashes of GeoNova, but from the solid foundation of my own work. There's a picture frame on the wall behind my desk. It doesn't contain a degree or a corporate award. It contains a printout of a single PowerPoint slide. The title slide from Alistair's failed presentation, the one with my name in the footer. To an outsider, it might seem like a strange trophy, a reminder of a victory, a scalp taken in a corporate war. But to me, it's not a trophy. It's a receipt. It's the proof of purchase for my own freedom. It's a reminder that my work is my signature, and I should never, ever let anyone else sign my name. It was never about revenge. It was about creating a space where the credit and the work live in the same place, where your contribution isn't a footnote but the headline. And this brings me to you. This isn't just my story. Maybe your Alistair wasn't a boss, but a coworker, a client, a partner. Maybe your Project Helios wasn't a piece of software, but an idea, a piece of art, a business plan. We've all had moments where we've been made to feel small, to feel invisible, to feel like a footnote in someone else's story. We've all poured our heart and soul into something, only to watch someone else carry it into the light and claim it as their own. But here's the thing they don't tell you. The dark is where seeds grow. The pressure is what creates diamonds. Your value isn't determined by the title on your business card or the seat you're given at the table. It's determined by the work you do when no one is watching. It's proven when you have the courage to step out of the shadows and show them what you've built. So if you've ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or erased, I want you to know something. You are not invisible. Your work matters. Your voice matters. Don't wait for someone to give you a ticket. Go out and buy your own. Build your own stage. And when you get there, speak your truth, show your work, and never ever let them erase your name. If this story resonated with you, if it gave you even a small spark of validation or strength, please do me a favor. Like this video and leave a comment below, sharing a time you felt your contribution was overlooked. Reading your stories helps me, and it helps everyone else here know that we are not alone in these fights. And if you want to be part of this community and see more stories about flipping the script and reclaiming your power, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. It's a small click, but it sends a powerful message that these stories need to be told. Thank you for listening.